What is going on, guys? My name is Kenji and welcome back to my channel. Hopefully it's not the first time you're watching my videos, but in case it is, I am a third year medical student studying at King's College London, and I'm back again for episode 2 of the Medschool diaries. In case you guys don't know what the series is, I started a new series where I basically talk to you guys about certain scenarios, certain things that happened to me during my time as a medical student. I obviously do have a number of videos, but I feel like the Medschool diaries are more of like a personal way to tell you guys a bit more about an in-depth situation that's happened to me whilst being a medical student. So as I said, this is episode 2. If you haven't watched episode 1 yet, go ahead and check that out. Episode 1 was about the time that I delivered a baby by cesarean section, also through a normal vaginal delivery. Go check that out if you haven't watched it yet. But today I'm going to be telling you guys about what happened today. The reason why I'm still in my clinical clothes is I had a crazy day. I'm just gonna, you know what, let's just start. I'm just gonna explain it to you guys. Alright, so to give you guys a bit of background about what happened today. So today's Friday. I started off my day at 9 AM in the mental health community centre. So every Friday I'm on my mental health placement, and I'm placed at a community centre where basically I work with psychiatrists and psychiatry trainees to try and assess patients in the community, people who have been referred from GP or from A&E as well. We try and see exactly what's going on with the patient, try and treat them acutely, and then once we decide that they either need hospital care, we'll refer them on to the psychiatric hospitals, or if they're well enough to go home, we'll refer them home and decide to see them in a couple of weeks, or we can refer them back to their GP, or just stop the treatment or assessment as a whole if we think they're completely fine. So this morning I got up, I got ready as I normally do, as a normal Friday. I got the train to my placement and I started at 9 AM. So 9 AM we had the morning meeting where we basically discussed all of the new patients, we discussed all of the current patients as well, and delegate tasks for the rest of the day. So we give certain patients to certain doctors, to the nurses, to the whole team. We divide all the patients between us, and we decide what needs to be done with the current patients and have a multidisciplinary chat about all the patients that we need to see. So that's how it started. We had about an hour of this meeting, and then we moved on from there to one of the rooms. One of the GP trainees who's currently placed in psychiatry was giving us a session on psychiatry in general and giving us a bit of a teaching session basically about psychiatry. So we had that for about another hour, and then by around 11 AM we decided to carry on the teaching in a different room where the computers were, because the computer in our room wasn't working. But as we're walking along to the next room, someone runs up to us and they're like, oh my gosh, is there a doctor here? Like, someone has just collapsed in the street, we really need a doctor. So I look over to my to my friend who's a medical student, and we both look at each other and we're like, all right. So we look up at the GP, and she's like, okay, I'm a doctor, it's fine, I'm coming. So all three of us, we run to the room where we were initially headed to. We drop all of our stuff, we had our laptops on us, we had our phones, we dropped everything there, and we walked really fast to the scene to see exactly what was going on. This is kind of a situation as a medic, whether you're a doctor or a medical student, this is kind of a situation that you kind of always dread, whether you're on a plane. Sometimes they announce, is there a medic on board? Is there like a medical professional on board? Can they please come and help us out? Sometimes it could be on a train. The last time this happened to me, I was actually on a bus in Budapest, and I was the only medic on the bus. It could be literally like anywhere, and they request a medic, and you're either with someone else or you're alone. You're the only medic in the whole entire room. And this is, as I said, as a medic, is a situation you kind of dread from happening, because you have the skills to help, but it is really scary when you're not in the hospital environment. Obviously, when you're in hospital and you have like support, it's a lot better and a lot easier to look after the patient. But when you're on your own, this is like probably one of the most, if not the most, scariest times as a medic. And also to briefly let you guys know about the training that I've had so far. So in medical school, as I said, I'm a third year, so I've had basic life support training that involves, everything from looking after the airway to breathing to CPR, all the sort of basic life support training and first aid training we've done. I've also been trained in A to E assessment, so advanced trauma life support assessment as well. So this is the whole A to E assessment that you do, in a secondary care in a hospital. And I've had obviously a lot of teaching, a lot of lectures on emergency care. So that's kind of all I've had so far. Obviously, I'm not a doctor. So we went downstairs, we went outside, and literally right in front of our doorstep, thank God it was so close to us, we could see a van in the middle of the street, kind of parked across the street, and right next to them was a crowd of people. So at this point, I'm like, I'm kind of like, let's go. I'm a bit nervous, but there is a side of me that's very excited. Obviously, I wasn't the most senior person there. I had the GP with me, so I felt, I wasn't as scared, but I was really excited to actually go and put my skills to the test. So we finally get to the scene, and as soon as the people divide ride apart. You know, we walk straight to the people and we're like, excuse me, like, we need to get to the scene, where the medic's here. We get to the scene and, you know, surely enough, there is an old lady who's lying across the street on her right side. And she really appeared to be in pain. She was kind of like crying out. So we got down on our knees, we introduced ourselves, and we asked if we could help her out. And straight away we started the ATE assessment, which I mentioned before. What was really lucky before actually assessing this patient is yesterday when I was on my placement on Thursday, I was actually placed in resus. So if you watch 24 Hours in A&E, you probably know what I'm talking about. But I was actually placed in the resus department, and you know, I had a run through of the AT assessment, you know, yesterday. The last time I actually went through the AT assessment was back in March when I was preparing for my OSCEs. So yesterday I saw a patient who had 6 stab wounds in her back, and we had to perform a full AT assessment on her, and we actually discovered a pneumothorax, which basically means one of her lungs collapsed. But that's a story for a different day. Going back to this patient, it was really helpful that I had the AT assessment done the day before to kind of have it fresh in my mind. But straight away, the doctor and I got on our knees and we started assessing the patient to try and see what was wrong with her. What I immediately went to do is to hold the lady's neck in place. This is called a cervical immobilization maneuver, technique, whatever you want to call it. Where basically you put your hands around the patient's neck and you try and stabilize their neck and stop them from moving. Because if someone has a suspected damage to their cervical spine, maybe a fracture or any damage to their cervical spine, it can be really bad for the patient because they can end up quadriplegic, paraplegic, paralyzed basically around their body. You can also lose innervation to your heart, to your lungs. So it really is important for me to start off by straight away stabilizing her head, making sure she doesn't move from side to side and make the damage any worse. Because obviously she was on the floor, it does indicate that she may have had head injury and a possible spinal injury as well. So I straight away went onto her head and stabilized it while the GP started the AT assessment. So straight away we could rule out A. We always start with A, which is the airway. So she was talking and, you know, she was breathing fine, so we can conclude that her airway was patent and that she didn't need any help in supporting her airway. Straight after A is B, so we moved on to B, which is breathing. We started off by assessing her breathing. We could see that both her lungs were inflating. She was breathing quite fast, but other than that, her breathing seemed to be stabilized. We then moved on to C, which is circulation. So we measured her radial pulse to see whether or not her heart was beating fast or not. If her heart is beating extremely fast, this could indicate shock. The patient could be going into cardiogenic shock because she could have some sort of internal bleeding, but that was all fine. Because she was breathing, we can conclude that her heart was obviously working and she was talking and stuff like that. So circulation we thought was relatively well covered. If she wasn't breathing, then we would have moved on to C and performed CPR. If someone stops breathing, you can assume that the heart has stopped. The reason why is that the heart actually stops before your breathing does. So if your breathing stops, you conclude that the heart has stopped right before that, and you can commence with CPR. But thank God, the patient was actually breathing, her heart was actually beating. We didn't have to perform CPR because doing CPR on the side of a road or anywhere in general is really hard and is very traumatic. You break the patient's ribs, you can break their sternum, you push down really hard. It's not something pleasant to do, so thank God we didn't have to do that. Throughout all of this was happening, I was talking to the patient, I was making sure that she was comfortable. We asked if we can call one of her relatives to let them know what was going on. We were also asking her if she has any sensation in her lower limbs and her hands as well. We asked if she can move her legs, move her hands as well, making sure that she doesn't have any other spinal injuries. After that, we then moved on to D, which is disability. We quickly assessed her GCS, which is a Glasgow Coma Scale, which basically is a measure of her level of consciousness, and we based that to be 15, which is the highest level of consciousness. She was speaking to us, she was alert, her eyes were open, so we concluded that she was okay in that sense. And that was more or less the primary survey done. We then moved on to a secondary survey. The primary survey is the first survey that you do when you see a patient, whether you're in A&E or on the road. You want to assess A, B, C, D, E. Then you want to move on to performing a secondary survey. A secondary survey basically involves looking at the rest of the body, make sure we didn't miss anything, making sure we didn't miss any bleeds, any obvious other damage, anything else we basically didn't notice. And we performed a secondary survey. She wasn't bleeding externally. All we ended up realizing after palpating her abdomen is that she had some pain in her right upper quadrant, which is basically right below her ribs. She also had some pain in her ribs on the right side. I'm pretty sure she fractured a few ribs because of that. She was breathing really fast, and combined with the rib fractures, I thought, or we both thought that she may have had a pneumothorax. But anyways, that was the AT assessment. While we were assessing the patient, we had someone else call the ambulance for her. So the ambulance were on their way, and they actually arrived really, really quickly. We're so lucky to live in London. The ambulance were there within 5 minutes, maybe maximum 8 minutes while we were assessing the patient. As soon as the ambulance crew arrived, they came onto scene and started helping us. Straight away, they asked who I was, what was I doing here, and I was like, oh, I'm a medical student, I really want to help this patient out. As soon as they heard I was a medical student, they were like, okay, cool. Here's the oxygen, give us some oxygen, help us out. So I was kind of like, for literally a split second, I was like, what, like me? Like, you want me to help? And then I realized that, yeah, I am a medical student. So I took the oxygen tank off of her, and I turned it on, I plugged it all in, and I administered oxygen to the patient. After putting the oxygen on her, I continued to stabilize her cervical neck. A couple of minutes later, the doctors then arrived. They actually called in a helicopter doctor. So the HEMS team, I think it's called Helicopter Emergency, I don't know. HEMS team arrived. So the doctors who fly in helicopters actually arrived. They parked in a park near us and ran over. The doctors then kind of took over. As soon as they arrived, I introduced myself again, and I've been helping out ever since. And they were like, yes, perfect, we need some more help, stay here, please. I continued to stabilize her neck as they performed another primary survey and a secondary survey. It really, really was important for them to carry on performing another primary survey. Of course, on the streets, we were able to perform a primary survey on her, but there were certain things that we couldn't do, like, we didn't have a stethoscope, so there's no point listening to her lungs. We couldn't, there's no point auscultating her and trying to make a sound in her lungs, because even if we found pneumothorax, for example, from auscultating her, we didn't have the equipment to manage that situation. So they came in and performed a thorough A-to-E assessment again in the context of hospital, because they had all of their equipment there ready for them. And this is amazing. Like, I was sat there holding this patient's head and just like witnessing what is going on here. It really felt like a live version 24 hours in A&E. Like, I actually felt like I was part of the team and I was there watching exactly what was going on. What I found really, really amazing and really, really inspiring is that all the doctors were very calm, they're very collected. They came in straight away, they knew exactly what they're doing. They were like, you do this, you do this, you do that. They performed the AT assessment very systematically. They were so calm, so collected, so controlled. I really admire that, and that is something I really, really want to practice in myself. The next thing that I had to do was to help them put the stretcher on. So as I was stabilizing her head, I had to help to put the stretcher onto one side. It's basically a stretcher which you connect. So one was this side, one was that side. They came round and they put the stretcher underneath the patient. I lifted her head up slightly, put it underneath her head. And right before we were able to put her fully onto the stretcher, we had to roll her onto one side, put the stretcher on one side, roll it onto the other side, and put the stretcher on the other side. The really cool thing is that this was under my call. So because I was holding her head, I was the most important person when it came to moving the body, because if they move the body while I was holding the head, we can fracture the neck even more, we can damage her neck even more. So my job in that situation was to say, ready, steady, roll. And as I said roll, the whole crew tilted it onto one side, put the stretcher on that side, and again I said ready, steady, roll, and then put the stretcher onto the other side. Although this seems really silly, I felt amazing that I had that amount of power. All of the doctors, all the paramedics were under my control, and I was kind of coordinating that maneuver, which is amazing. I'm only a third year medical student. Having that experience was just like, but I felt amazing, like having that power to help the patient. Once this was all done, we actually lifted the patient up and put her onto the actual rolling bed, rolling trolley, whatever you want to call it, to take her into the ambulance. At this point, I passed them on to the doctors. I let the doctors do the rest of the job, and I kind of like just stepped back a little bit. And it was this point where I realized just how tired I was. I didn't realize how long I was sat there. It was raining, it was cold, it was like 12 degrees Celsius. I was like kneeling down, holding this one position, for such a long time. So as soon as I stood up, I realized like actually how much pain I was in. My back was really hurting, my knees were really hurting, and to be honest, it was really nothing compared to what the patient must have been going through. But I didn't realize like actually how long I was sat there holding the patient's head and helping them with that. Once that was all done, the police came over to me. They asked for my details. They asked for my name, where I live, and also my contact number. I guess in case there was any kind of forensic crime or something to do with forensics, if they needed to contact someone, I imagine they need me to give like a witness statement, or just tell them exactly what I did. I told them that I performed some first aid, some basic life support for the patient, and that was pretty much it in terms of the doctors. I kind of just stood aside after that, and what was really, really lovely actually is that all of the paramedics and the doctors who were working on the scene came up to me and thanked me for my help. That really, really felt good. Like, I actually felt like I made a difference. I actually feel like I helped the team out. And that, I really can't describe that feeling. And that was really, really such an amazing feeling. After this all happened, I was walking back to where I was working, and straight away the psychiatrists I was supposed to be working with were actually leaving the building, and were like, "Are you okay? Like, you know, we're going to see a patient now on a home visit. Do you want to take a break?" And, you know, of course, I decided to go with them. And straight away, it was on to seeing another patient. And yeah, no break in between. But yeah, straight on to the day. We went to see another patient on a home visit. And that was actually a really interesting case. So I'm glad I didn't actually take a break. Everyone was like, "Oh my God, like, are you okay? Like, you know, do you need to talk to someone? Like, do you want to talk to me about this?" And I was like, "No, like, I'm actually okay. Like, I'm really, really happy that I was actually, you know, able to help." And it was honestly an amazing situation for me. Like, I really hope the patient survived. Actually, no, I'm pretty certain she survived. And to be honest, it wasn't the worst case scenario that could have happened on a roadside. Yeah, I'm really happy that she was, you know, looked after well, and the ambulance took her, and she was taken to one of the major trauma centres. So after this all happened, the rest of the day carried on, and I came home at 5 p.m. and I actually took some time to just reflect and write a few things down that I learned from the situation. So I want to read that out to you guys right now. The first thing that I really learned in the situation was that, you know, as a medical student, as a medic, you're not just a member of the public anymore. You're not just someone on the side of the road. You're actually there. You're actually someone who can help. You actually have responsibility, and you have the ability to change people's lives and save people's lives. You know, what was really amazing is that, you know, as soon as I came down to the scene, you know, people were surrounding her, and they stood apart, and they let the medics come through, and they let me and the doctor and the other medical student come through and, you know, provide some support. So as a medical student, you have to remember that, you know, sometimes in the back of your head, you have it in you like, "I'm only a medical student, like, I can't provide any help." But actually, you have to remember that you have basic life support training. You know, you've had teaching on advanced trauma life support. You've been, like, we've been trained for this situation. Like, this has happened so many times. Like, we've had scenarios, simulations, starting from last year all the way to this year. We've had emergency simulations in the hospital. We've been in A&E. Like, this is what we've been training for. Like, I've spent hours practicing OSCEs. Like, actually, one of the last vlogs that I did, we actually performed this ATE assessment. So go check it out if you haven't. I'll try and put it on the screen somewhere. But, you know, we actually trained for this in March. You know, as part of my OSCEs, I did this so many times. And this is what we're trained for. Like, you have to realize that you know, you're not just a medical student. You're someone who can actually provide help and change lives. And I was really, really happy and really, really lucky to be part of that experience, to hopefully have made a difference on that patient's life. The next thing that I kind of realized after doing this is that being a doctor is a life. Like, it's a life decision. Like, it's not just a 9-to-5 job. When you sign up to be a medic, it is your life. Like, a lot of people, you know, they start at 9, they clock off at 5 p.m. But being a doctor, like, it doesn't start at 5 p.m. Like, if you're walking home and someone collapses on the streets, like, straight away, you're the doctor, you're back in work mode. Like, you can't really slip up. Like, you know, if you're on a plane, you're sleeping or relaxing, you might be having a drink, and straight away you hear, like, someone's in trouble, someone needs your help. Like, it's not a 9-to-5 job anymore. When you're a doctor, it's a life decision, and you're a medic, you know, for the rest of your life, and as long as you choose to be one. Which is quite scary. Like, it is, like, sometimes, I'm not gonna lie, when I'm on I'm on a plane or I'm on a bus, I'm like, please, someone, like, don't collapse right now. There has been times, as I mentioned, I might make a separate video on this, but there was a time in Budapest when I was on a bus, and I nearly had to perform CPR on a patient who collapsed on the road, on the bus by myself. There's been times where I'm in a restaurant and someone collapses to the floor, and I've been the first medic there on the scene as well. Nothing quite as dramatic as this, but it is a life decision to make, and it's not one to be taken lightly. But also, it's a huge privilege. Like, it's a lot of responsibility, but it's a huge privilege to be able to help someone like that. What I really, really love about being a medic as well is, as soon as I went to the situation and I sat down and I said to her, I was like, you know, "Hi, my name's Kenji, I'm a medical student, I'm here to help you." As soon as I said those few words, she pretty much put her life in my hands, in my colleagues' hands as well. As soon as you said, like, "I'm going to take care of you, I'm a medic," and I grabbed her head and I held her head in that position, and we started to perform the AT assessment. Like, these people literally give their life to you. Like, they put their life in your hands, and they put so much trust in you. Like, not just them, but their family. Like, we had her daughter on the phone, and they put so much trust in us as medics to help them out. And that is such a huge thing. Like, very, very few, jobs in the world allow you to have that control over someone, to help them in such a way, which is such a privilege. The next thing I learned is that you might only be a medical student, and being a medical student is not just about what you can do, it's also about what you can stop people from doing. What I mean by that is that when I was in Budapest and someone collapsed on the bus, you know, I had all of these people, like, obviously they're trying to help the patient, but they're shouting this, like very medically incorrect information, which can actually put the patient at, an increased risk of dying. And for example, if I wasn't on the scene and let's say people were trying to move the patient around, she could have, damaged her neck even more so than, what she already had. So just being someone who can be there, not necessarily to help or to perform any like life-saving procedures, but just to stop the general public from doing anything that can actually further hurt the patients. As a quick side note, it just came to my head. It's kind of like in Spider-Man where was it Uncle Ben? Yeah, I think it was Uncle Ben. When Uncle Ben was like, with great power comes great responsibility.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
And like to a certain extent, like that actually is really, really true. Like with the power to help someone in a situation like this, you have so much responsibility, and that's not a decision to be taken lightly at all. So that is pretty much the situation. I feel like I've been rambling on for such a long time. After this, straight away, not gonna lie, I picked up the phone and I called my mum and I was like, Mum, you have no idea what just happened. I really felt like I wanted to share this experience. I just, I was full of emotions and full of like joy and excitement of having managed someone on the streets for the first time. Like, this is actually on the road. So for the first time, managing a major trauma situation, and not just being like any sort of like minor injury, a major trauma situation. I spoke to my mum about it and I was like, Mum, like you have no idea what's happened, and she's really, really proud of me. So shout out to you, Mum. I know you're going to be watching this video, so shout out to you. But that is pretty much it, guys. I absolutely love doing these videos. I love like sitting at home and having the camera up and talking to you guys about this. It really is like also a really good like chance for me to reflect on the situation. Hopefully come back to this video when I'm like a consultant and listen to the first time that I help someone on the road. I love doing these videos, so if you do actually enjoy them, let me know with a thumbs up, let me know in the comments down below, let me know if you do, and I definitely will sit down and talk to you guys more about all the experiences that I've had, all these crazy, insane, fun, exciting, sad experiences that I've had as a medical student. I really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I'm sorry if I'm a bit like chilled. Like I know the last like Medschool diaries I was a lot more bubbly. I've had like a 9 to 5 today, and that was like a really big situation that took a lot of my energy out of me. But I really appreciate you guys watching. If you did enjoy it, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed. Do all of that stuff. Follow me on Instagram and everything like that. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll speak to you guys on the next one.